Hey, this is Paul Elliott here, and Dr. Ralph Lamson asked me to give a little talk for you guys in your continuing education class. I'm a software developer, and I've been making 3D graphics VR applications for a while. And I think what I'd like to cover with you guys is just go over some examples in the therapeutic space, a few VR applications that I know about, and we'll look at some different approaches. And maybe then we'll talk a little bit about the different platforms that are available to do immersive, VR therapy. From like full headsets to, just using a mobile phone device potentially or a projection screen. And then we'll look at maybe the software and how the sausage is made a little bit, if you can stick with me towards the end here. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples and see what's out there right now. So kind of the easiest, the way that people have first approached making kind of immersive VR content is using 360 video or 360 images, right? And this can be very compelling here. Here, if we take a look at this spherical video, they call it, and you can look around and it's as if you're kind of in this setting, right? They've taken a video camera with maybe a couple lenses, a couple cameras, and merged the images together, and you can kind of look around as if you're there, right? And this is very compelling, right? I mean, it's the real world. It's great, great content, great stimulus, and fairly easy to make, right? You just buy this expensive camera rig, and you're good to go. Now that's interesting, but it's not interactive, of course, right? You're just looking at a standard linear movie, and also there's no depth information actually here. There's no stereo information, so it's as if you're watching a movie screen and not even a 3D movie at that, which might be important for adding to the immersion. So what do we do to get around that? Well, then we move to doing a full 3D environment, and here these guys in Barcelona have got a little psychotherapy environment they've made, and it's a bit blurry here, but you can see there's a guy wearing a head-mounted display, one of these headsets, and he's actually giving advice to himself as embodied as Freud here. So as you can see here, you can see that he's looking in a mirror, and he has actually become Freud, and he can see himself there as Freud, and he can go ahead and give advice to address whatever problem he's interested in, right? So there's his representation that they've scanned him in, so he can kind of actually talk to himself, and this is a big step beyond, or a different approach than doing that 360 video, right? We've got an interactive situation, and it's using 3D graphics. It's not just a flat video image. We're making a 3D world that he can actually move around in and get the proper stereo depth perception in the 3D world. And he can also interact, right? So he's got some little balls down at the bottom here where he can like touch and then switch position with himself and Freud. Kind of an interesting simulation they've got going on here. So those guys are doing that in Barcelona, a little like empty chair technique. And then what's also I found really interesting is this Patrick Bordnick fellow, a researcher, and he's got this some addiction research that he's been working on, where you go into kind of a virtual house party, and and you check out, and you could feel the pressure of having a drink or use some sort of drug in a kind of a real environment, right? And again, this is an interactive because it's a full 3D scene, more than just a movie. Well, what's the downside? Of course, it's not quite as realistic looking, but it's a lot more responsive, right? So that's pretty interesting. So that's Patrick Bordnick and his work. So those are some interesting examples for therapy. And so what do you experience these kind of, I guess, scenarios in? What kind of medium are we using? Well, here we're just doing the desktop. I'm just using my keyboard and mouse and looking at a monitor. But of course, it's really nice if you can get yourself a head-mounted display, and then you can really cut off the rest of the world and put one of these on and look around a virtual world or that 360 video and really feel like you're immersed in it and really focus on whatever stimulus you're interested in. So you've got the kind of desktop and the next level of commitment. You use a head-mounted display. And there's also these kind of old-school tech. It's very expensive, but if you really want to, use another medium here, there's the projection systems, which are basically super large screens that you can immerse yourself in. They're called caves. But you can also just use maybe a couple of big TVs, and you can walk around in a virtual environment. And what's interesting here is that you can actually be in there with other people as well, which is kind of a nice situation. So it's like semi-social. You're not cut off from your body. You can still see yourself, but you are still immersed in this kind of virtual world. Okay. So we got the desktop. We've got head-mounted displays. We can use these large projection screens. And of course, there's also the mobile medium, right? And that's kind of on the super casual, low commitment end of the spectrum. Something that encourages really short use, just a quick check, a quick stimulus potentially, and you can use it more often, right? It's not such a big commitment. All right, so let's look at some of the interactions that are possible with a virtual environment. I'm going to be using the Quest here, and I've got these two controllers. They have a couple buttons and these trigger buttons on the front. And I'll show you kind of some of the standard stuff that most virtual environments want to use. Maybe for a therapy situation, you might want to leave out a few just to keep it simpler. But here we go. We're looking at the Oculus Home situation, and I've got this 3D website I'm looking at that I've created, and we can go ahead and jump into it immersively. So now in the headset, I'm kind of immersed into it, and I can see my hands. And a lot of times what you'll want to do in a virtual environment is you're going to want to move around, right? So I can move around physically, and that'll move me a few meters left and right depending on the size of my space. But if I want to move a long distance, I can go ahead and press a button on the controller here, and it goes ahead and creates this teleport kind of interface, this teleport control, and that'll let me move around a big distance. And it's nice to teleport sometimes instead of to kind of drive around, because that can encourage motion sickness. So the standard now is to teleport. So now I can move around my little toy scene here. And then that's all well and good, and oftentimes you want to activate a menu, right? You want to change some setting. So if I click down on a joystick, I can click one of these buttons, I pop up this menu, and I can click the trigger and I can interact with it and click some buttons, maybe change some settings. In the virtual environment though, what if I want to play around with these objects in the virtual environment? Well, oftentimes you want to grab things. So I'm going to reach down here to the box, and look, I can pick it up by clicking the trigger, and I can pick it up, maybe try and grab it again, toss it. So maybe you'd use this to interact with some objects in the virtual environment, maybe open a door, grab a beer, whatever you want to do, right? So those are the three kind of big ones, right? You got to navigate around. The teleportation is kind of the most popular these days. Maybe in a therapy environment, you just kind of want to put people on a railroad tracks and limit the direction they can go, where they can go. So you just kind of move them along like a Disney park ride. But oftentimes you want to interact with a little menu, change some settings, so that we can use something like this. And here, notice I don't have to actually reach out and touch the buttons. I've got this kind of laser controls that kind of can reach out and let me click things far away. And of course, maybe you want something a little more realistic, and you can pick up things directly, as in kind of more like the real world, and that would be how that works, right? With this kind of grabbing interaction. So yeah, those are the three big ones. This is all possible too with a projection screen as well, and of course there's metaphors for these on the desktop, picking up and grabbing things. Well, why don't we jump into and see how the sausage is made a little bit here. If you guys are going to stick with me, I'll show you kind of how to create a 3D world, what ingredients go into it. Well, you've got your 3D models, right? And you use a 3D modeling program to make them. And let's go ahead and check that out and see how that works here. A popular 3D modeling program is Blender. It's a free open source one, and it's kind of nice. I've made a nice upgrade to it lately. And here we've got our 3D scene, right? And this is set up so that we can modify it and go ahead and create a little scene for us to explore around in the virtual environment. So let's go over the high level real quick. So you've got your 3D models, kind of your basic ingredients for the dish you're going to cook. You've got maybe you take those and you're going to pull them into a 3D engine, and that's what's going to go ahead and render the 3D graphics and connect to the hardware. And inside that 3D engine, you'll define the interactivity. Can I pick up the block here? What does the menu look like? What buttons are on the menu? That sort of thing. That's defined in the 3D engine. And of course, then that you take that 3D engine, usually you output a file from there, and then you load that up on the headset or just the desktop computer, wherever you want to run your virtual environment. But let's just run through real quick, how to set up a simple scene, and we'll take a look at how Blender does it. And 3D graphics, they're made up of these shapes, right? Here we just got this gray cube here. But these shapes are made up of individual pieces, and they call them vertices, these points. And they go ahead and define wherever these points are in space. That kind of defines the shape of the form, of the 3D form, right? So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can move my box around here, right? So why don't I do that? I'll move them over here a little bit. Move it down in the scene. So this is the origin of the scene here, the beginning of the crosshairs here. And this is not so interesting unless we want a box, but oftentimes you want to make something more detailed, right? So how would you do that? Well, you go ahead and go in here, and we can start cutting up the box and adding some more points to it. See, we went ahead and added another vertex here, another vertex, a couple of them actually. And now if I grab these vertices here, and instead of just moving the whole box around, look, I can start sculpting the box, right? So here we've got kind of this little house shape, misshapen house. And I can go ahead and maybe make a door somehow, etc. You know, you can spend a long time building these 3D models and sculpting them. There's a lot of art that goes into it. But we definitely need a floor plane, right? You know, we've got our little house. Let's have a ground to stand on, because right now, you know, there's no ground, right? So we can go ahead and add in another object here. We've got this plane. I'm going to go ahead and scale it up here. All right, so now we've got something to walk on. And that's all well and good, but you notice they're just kind of this gray, you know, paper cutout stuff. And oftentimes you'll want to make a material to put on your forms that we're making by changing these vertices. And let's go ahead and put some sort of brick material onto our plane, so it's more than just this gray surface, right? It will make it look like a brick. And what I'll do, I'll go ahead and grab my plane here. So I've selected my plane. I go over here to my material. I check out on the material tab. I can edit the base color. And we'll go ahead and make the base color an image texture. And this is just a JPEG image. I've got one downloaded. Okay, so look at that. So now we've got this ground plane here with this brick texture on it, right? Now the bricks are really big, right? So we have to define the mapping of the image onto the surface, and you know, that's another step in the modeling process here. So here we can go ahead and look at it. Oops. Right. Okay, so here we go. We've got our image here, and it's hard to see, but there's these little dots, and that defines, you know, where are these map to points on the 3D world here too. So if we want to scale this up, okay, now the bricks are getting smaller, right? A little more properly sized. Okay. So that's all well and dandy. Once we get this looking how we want, you know, we're in our 3D modeling program. This is not the 3D engine, right? This is just where we create our forms, apply our materials, get things looking how we want. What we have to do is we export out of the 3D modeling program. I'm not going to export out of Blender here. Go ahead and save this file into a format that our 3D engine can go ahead and load, and then the 3D engine will show that file on the headset, right? Go ahead and put it in here. Export the scene. Alright, so now I've got this folder on the desktop here. And this is the scene that we exported, just this untitled this file here. And we can go ahead and load it up in our 3D engine. And I'm going to use this AFrame 3D engine that I'm a fan of at the moment. And I'm going to open up my code editor. This is just a text editor. Opened up my scene. So this is just a text file, and it's actually an HTML file. It's the same technology, or the same text files that are used to power websites. This is a 3D website, and in here I've got a little line in here, and this is loading a 3D model. And let's go ahead and change this to whatever I exported this as, untitled.glb. Untitled.glb, and let's go ahead and see if we see anything here. Let's go ahead and load this up. So I'm just going to open up a little web server, and that's going to fire up the browser, and we're going to look at our 3D scene. Hopefully we got something in there. Okay, there it is, yeah. So here we can already look around, and I've got some lines in here that tell it, give me some keyboard and mouse controls to look around. They're pretty nice, and there's a couple lines, I can click on the box here and change its color, just some test stuff. So that's kind of the basic ingredients, how to put a scene together. And this AFrame 3D engine that we're using to pull in the 3D model file and define the interactivity, say like clicking the box and moving around. It's got a little built-in VR mode button down at the bottom. So if I had a headset connected, I would go ahead and see this in VR. So yeah, that's pretty simple. That's basic overview. And of course, sometimes you also want to do characters, right? I mean, everybody needs some people in there to talk to, and maybe we want to load up a character here. And here there's this character I've grabbed before, downloaded off the internet. I'm going to go ahead and pull him into Blender. And see, there he is now. So now he's kind of hanging out in our scene. And what's kind of nice about him is he's got a little animation associated with him too, right? So we could export him out and check him out in our scene here, if we so wanted. Kind of nifty. But all these things, they're actually available. They're available online. There's a lot of 3D models online that'll get you started. The good ones you have to pay for, but there's some websites out there like TurboSquid. And it's a collection of 3D models out there that you can download, and a lot of them are for sale. The good ones are for sale. But you do have to be careful, because they could be in formats and they could be set up in ways that won't work for the 3D engine that you're trying to use. They could be, say, like this zombie here, or these characters are really good looking, but they're not ready for real-time use. They won't look like that in any real-time engine. This is used for actually rendering in the 3D modeling program and making a movie or an image. And that's for a real-time situation when you got to render at 60 times a second, 60 frames a second or faster even for VR. The Oculus Quest is 72 frames a second. You can't get that good a quality. So yeah, these are concerns. But this is great that there are resources out there, and you can see it's expensive. It's $100 or so, but considering the time that it took to build these characters, it's a steal. So yeah, so you can get 3D objects from the web. There's libraries out there. And defining the interactivity for your app is a lot of work too, right? I mean, to do something interesting besides changing the color of a box, it takes a little bit of effort, right? And that's programming that you got to do that. So yeah, that's how 3D graphics are made, how a 3D graphics engine is made. It's a lot to go into it. So yeah, so there's so much, and you can spend, you can go down the rabbit hole and spend weeks and weeks, tuning things, getting your look to be how you like it, or creating the interactivity in the flow that you think will work, and then when you hand it to a user to go ahead and try it out, not even in a therapy scenario yet, just if somebody can understand what buttons to press to get it move around, make sure they don't get lost in the world, do they know what to do next, these situations, like it's really easy to overlook this stuff as someone who's making it themselves. So you always have to keep getting feedback as early as possible. Otherwise you could waste a lot of time going down a route where you think something's important, but in the end, you're totally missing the point. And if they can't even find this interesting little feature that you've tucked into the corner somewhere, then what's the point, right? So it's good to test things out early with users. Somebody who's not on your team, someone who hasn't seen it before. So, and yeah, and it takes a lot longer usually. The whole development cycle takes a lot longer than anyone expects. You ask a developer, it'll just take a couple days, I can whip it out. You check in a couple days and they're like, oh yeah, a couple more days, I'll have it. And it just keeps going on, so yeah, it takes definitely twice as long or more than you expect. Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Elliott. Thanks to Ralph for inviting me to talk to you guys. And yeah, good luck.